In this series of conversations, Vidhi speaks with queer academics, lawyers, and activists on marriage equality and beyond. The series touches upon the marriage equality petitions before the Supreme Court of India and the relationship between queer movements and the law. It highlights the need for community consultation, the importance of legal recognition to intimacies beyond marriage, demands of the transgender community, and the future of family law in India. In this conversation on Vidhi Beyond Marriage Equality, we speak with Pawan Dhall, a queer activist, archivist, and author from Kolkata on the marriage equality matter and the need for community consultation on the concerns of diverse members of the queer community in India.
Hello and welcome to today's conversation on Vidhi Beyond Marriage Equality. I'm Shreyashi and I'm joined today by Pawan Dhall. Pawan is a Kolkata-based queer activist, archivist, researcher and writer. He was a founding member of Council Club Kolkata, which was among India's earliest queer support groups. Pawan also edited its in-house journal Varta. He then worked with Sati from 2022 to 2014 on universal access to health and social justice, and is now associated with Varta Trust as founding trustee. He's also a prolific writer, and his latest publications include Queer Portly, Memories, Imaginations, and Reimaginations of Urban Queer Spaces in India, which was published by Queer Inc. in 2019, and Out of Line and Offline, Queer Mobilizations in 90s Eastern India, which was published by Seagull Books in 2020. Thank you so much for joining us, Pawan.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So we just start with getting your general input and thoughts on the ongoing marriage equality demands and proceedings that have been ongoing. And the Supreme Court has reserved judgment on it, but we've had a long session of arguments, demands, as well as counter affidavits. So just wanted to know your thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm. Well, at one level, I would definitely say that the demand for marriage equality is justified. There are a large number of queer couples in the country today who feel that marriage equality, the right to marry, will be the pathway ahead for them to have a better quality of life, for them to be better able to negotiate the realities of a society. I think, well, some of them may have a very romantic notion of marriage, but I think there are also a lot of couples who are thinking about it in a hard-headed manner. And so, come to think of it, marriage does offer so many securities, and I'll put that in inverted commas because many of those securities, unfortunately, tend to be an illusion. The experience of so many people says that marriage is not exactly what it seems like. Especially the wedding ceremony should not be mixed up with marriage. Those are two very different things. So, but at the same time, I totally understand that for a queer person, looking for security, looking for protection from stigma, discrimination, violence all around, marriage might offer that security. And so therefore that demand for marriage equality to that extent is justified. But having said that, I would say that I want to again talk about the fact that marriage does prove to be very unequal. It is based on it is an institution that is inherently unequal because it is because of its close connection with patriarchy, and so it's not exactly what it seems to be. It seems to be like a star or a lighthouse in the darkness, but then it doesn't prove to be that. And I think that my larger sensibility or my larger thinking behind this says that as a movement, as queer movements, plural movements, we should have strategized differently. Marriage equality should have been an outcome of several other changes, progressive changes, incremental or large ones, that doesn't matter, but many other changes which would make an impact on the day-to-day lives of queer people. And I want to emphasize queer people, not just couples. I also want to talk about queer individuals. So herein this question comes in, that why should my rights as a queer person be realized by me only if I get married? Why don't I get the same protection, the same benefits, the same respect, even if I'm not married, even if I'm single, or maybe I have more than one romantic relationship or sexual relationship? Uh, why this premium on marriage? So that's another reason why I want to question this institution of marriage. We should have looked at other realizable gains after decriminalization. The focus should really be on anti discrimination in all aspects of life. So that does include marriage, but not right away. I know in an ideal world, I'm talking about an ideal situation perhaps, but I think this was also practical if it had been done this way. So we could have pursued, we could have pushed harder to make sure that queer couples don't have to struggle to open joint bank accounts or have a joint housing loan, or that they don't have to, for that matter, they don't have to struggle with the police and their own natal families just to live together, just to cohabit as consenting adults. That still doesn't happen, does it? I mean, move out of the bigger cities and you realize how harsh the natal family can be, the larger community can be, and how uh, defiant the police is of what the Supreme Court has said about decriminalization. They, it is like for a lot of police officers, their area, their police station is their fiefdom,
Yeah.
and their writ runs large there. They don't bother. They will tell you on your face, we don't care what the Supreme Court has said about decriminalization. So these are the changes. If we would have brought them, or if we, there is still time, and I'm sure a lot of people are still doing this. If we pursue these changes, I also want to mention nominating your partner for your insurance policies, for your bank accounts, uh, property, willing away your property, all these issues. If we were to focus on these, what in effect we would be doing is something good for the larger queer community and not just people interested in the narrow concept of marriage. So we need protection for individuals, we need protection for people in relationships, which are not necessarily marriage. And then, yes, also the right to marry.
Absolutely. So, Pawan, you've been in the movement for over 3 decades now, and you've written extensively about it as well. So, in your experience and in your research, what were the initial consultation-based discussions regarding marriage or family or other kinds of community within the peer community? Because one of the criticisms that have been raised time and time again with this set of petitions is that most of them are not based on a larger community consultation. So if you could
Yeah.
throw some light on the consultation that has happened over the decades and which we probably take from to inform our next steps, if you could just throw light on some of them, that would be great.
So I would first talk about two developments which happened in the 90s, mid and the late 90s, where I was part of those. The first was the NAZ Humsafar Trust conference in 1994 in Mumbai, where marriage and family, these were two very important issues that were discussed in small groups and then also discussed in larger plenary sessions. So there, the main emphasis, though, was on not so much on marriage, but more on family acceptance and also talking about family diversity. So, but those were early days, and as far as my memory goes, there was a lot of discussion around ideas, but uh, a more concrete discussion was something that happened in 1997. That was another LGBT, or rather LGB, the uh, T expression had yet to, find space. But it was an LGB conference organized by Forum Against Oppression of Women, Stree Sangam, the erstwhile Stree Sangam, then the India Centre for Human Rights and Law and Council Club. This was also in Mumbai in I think November 1997. This is where it was a big eye opener for me personally and a lot of my other queer activist colleagues, because we actually for the first time talked about different forms of family which is not necessarily in the narrow sense of a natal family through, and not just also through adoption, but chosen families, siblings living together or friends living together, uh, and not even necessarily in the same household. So these were people were sharing a variety of experiences, a variety of ideas or possibilities, and so we talked about redefining the concept of family, right? And um, one thing, of course, though, when I look back, I realized that we did not actually talk about the Hijra households or the Hijra teras in this conference as well. Because if you look at it, then the concept of a Hijra household is already an alternative family structure, right? And this is part of a culture, this is part of a tradition, and it has been so for hundreds of years. So we already have a precedent to look at family diversity. And we also looked at the question of marriage, how marriage could play itself out in the context of a same sex couple. Because the concept of marriage is really, it's totally designed around a heterosexual or heterosexist concept of man, woman, where man is the breadwinner and woman runs the household and she's always subservient to the husband. Whereas for the very first time, I think we were trying to articulate situations of what happens if both the persons are women or both the persons are men. Can we envisage a situation where each person has complete equal rights on their own property? Whatever they bring into the marriage or into the relationship, they should have complete ownership of that particular part of that particular property or asset or whatever it is. And it was all very alien at that time, but also revolutionary. It also seemed that okay, this sounds good, this should be the case. Why isn't this the case, right? And why should it be actually be limited to same sex couples? That was also a question in our minds. So I remember the 97 conference, and the proceedings during the conference were captured in an amazing resource book called Hamjinsi, which was first published in 99 and then 2002. And it has chapters or papers on same sex marriage from Holland. It has a paper on the discussions that we had during the conference, and in particular, the Forum Against Oppression of Women. They had tried to bring up this discussion around marriage equality is what we are calling it today. So, marriage equality and family diversity, among other women's groups. So, there were these questions also. I was reading it in Hamjinsi. There were these questions that why do you want to again institutionalize queer relationships? So, once again, the fact is that yes, if somebody says no, I don't want to be part of any institutionalized system, then they're always free to do that. But at the same time, even if a relationship is not marriage, it would still be helpful to have clarity about the equal rights of the two or more persons involved, right? So I think this should inform our debate even today. I mean, we are talking about what you call the uh, is it the least common denominator or some such concept, where you talk about not a situation which applies only to a handful of people, but to the largest possible number of people, and protect the rights of everyone, not just people entering uh, the traditional or a copy of the traditional concept of marriage. So these two conferences I remember. There were further discussions I remember in another conference, again organized by Humsafar and a number of other queer support groups in 2000, once again in Mumbai. Um, Subsequently, uh, I was part of Council Club, so we had a number of discussions. We wrote articles on the issue of queer relationships, queer friendships, but in my knowledge, I haven't come across any other concrete discussion around marriage equality, which has gone missing actually. It didn't happen even before these petitions. So it would have been an opportunity to thrash out a lot of these issues. To some extent, the Rituparna Bora petition does offer a way out because it talks about family diversity, it talks about protection, and not just same-sex marriage.
Yeah. So I think now the conversation is taking a turn. I mean, of course, we all hope for a positive verdict from the Supreme Court, but now there are talks of, the Supreme Court reserving itself to a constitutional recognition and leaving the rest to the legislature, and the union saying that we are ready to form a committee for discussing the issues that queer people and queer couples and queer families might face. So if we take this opportunity to kind of thrash out the same issues that you were just mentioning, what do you think should be the next steps? Of course, we do hope for a positive verdict from the Supreme Court, but at the same time, we need to look at what are the options that must be utilized to the fullest. So in that sense, what are the areas that you would like these queer movements to kind of focus on and prioritize at this stage?
I am not a great one with regard to committees and all. And in fact, if I look back, I seem to have missed out on a whole lot of committees which were formed for promoting LGBT rights, partly because, unfortunately, within the movement, there is no, I have to point this out because one has to be self-critical as well. And I don't think that there within the movement, within the queer movements, there is enough sharing of information and exchange of ideas. People are not working as they used to with regard to Section 377. There might be various reasons for this, but I think that even before we sit before any committee for negotiations about what should be, guaranteed for queer couples, I think that there is an opportunity, there's a window of an opportunity for the queer movement, for the queer groups to have a national dialogue. And, today you have the benefit of the internet, of Zoom calls, to reach the remotest corners and either in person or over online to find out what people want. What are the opinions? What are the different nuances? What are the different demands that people have in mind? Is it marriage? And if marriage, then in what form? And if not marriage, then at least what? Right? So there is still this opportunity. And I think the queer movements need to thrash this out and have a clarity of their own. And this would definitely include all the petitioners, the current petitioners. I'm sure they should be part of this dialogue. And then one should be there sit before the committee. And also there needs to be some kind of, I don't know if it'll work out at all or not, but what is going to be the constitution of that committee? Who's going to be part of it? Right? So that also has to be thrashed out. I can think of only this much. I think it's an opportunity for us to do our own homework as a community, as a movement, before talking to the government.
Absolutely, and I think that's a good note to end on, because I feel that now that we have so many voices talking about this, and we have people cluing in on this debate, it's a good opportunity to, instead of confidently saying that these are the three things we want, to do a more thorough consultation. And you're part of more grassroots movements, you're part of the Queer Friendly Lawyers Network, which interacts with the queer community and the daily issues that different diverse people within the community face. So I think that's a good reflective note to.
I would since there is an opportunity, I would again emphasize the need for police reforms. It's a huge thing, of course, it's a huge concept, but at least, again, incremental changes, if that is what one is talking about, then the police, I would say that in the experience of QFLN, the Queer Friendly Lawyers Network, there have been some pleasant surprises. There have been occasions when trans people, when they have gone to the police station to file a complaint, they have been, their complaint has been registered. But this still appears as an exception, not the rule. And we have so many people calling up, talking about either domestic violence or violence from their immediate community, neighbors, workplace discrimination. But when it comes to filing a police complaint, that is where the biggest hitch is. As activists and lawyers, we can help them frame their complaint. We can give them information. But at the end of the day, this entire negotiation that begins inside one's mind is that, am I going to land in deeper trouble? Because the stigma is still there. And the police does play moral police even now. They will tell you, why aren't you listening to your parents? Why aren't you getting married and being good and having 2 kids, and etc., etc. Why are you doing this? Why are you spoiling your life? All of that. That is a mild form, but it goes deeper. It can become even more aggressive. And there are so many cases where adult queer individuals have voluntarily left their homes. But there have been so many instances where queer activists have been in trouble because the family filed the case of kidnapping, and the police, in spite of knowing that the person who has left was an adult and has actually informed the police station that I'm leaving of my own free will, they will still register a case because the family has said so. So one would look for at least these changes in the relationship that queer people have with the police, because otherwise these are the what I would call the nth moment issues, which need to be tackled, which are not being talked about, unfortunately.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, the other rights pertaining to social autonomy, financial autonomy, banking, finance, property, that shouldn't ideally be tied to an institution as such.
Yes.
But yes, these are various areas in which queer people face this, and not just queer people, single cishet people would also face that without being married. Yes. So those are incremental and intermediate steps that we must take, while also obviously advocating for rights like marriage equality. So yes. I think that was really insightful, and I think not a lot of people talk about the movements and the conversations that have already happened in India. And the dominant criticism is also that this is like an elite concept or a Western concept. So I think it's important to talk about these consultations and conversations that have happened. And we're really glad that we were able to have you on board to talk about them.
Happy to share my thoughts.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Pawan, and thank you so much for your time, and we hope to see you again in some other application.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Bye.